Good morning, colleagues. May I ask you to take your seats? May I ask you to take your seats? Good morning, colleagues. I hope you had a good rest so that you are able to take on another very full day. We have on our agenda this morning the continuation of item 8 on marine and coastal biodiversity and item 9 on biodiversity and health. However, we have some unfinished business to complete first. Before we take up our agenda items, I wish to remind you that as you are making your interventions, your words are being translated into 5 other languages by a team of highly professional interpreters seated above and behind you. In order for them to make your words available to all of your colleagues, they are requesting you to please upload your statement at least 5 minutes prior to taking the floor. Read your statement at dictation speed to ensure accurate interpretation. Ensure that your statement falls within allocated time without the need to increase your reading speed. Thank you in advance for your kind cooperation. Before we begin, I will give the floor to Secretariat for some schedule-related announcements. Secretariat? I will do it later. Secretariat will inform you later. We will continue. Now we will return to item 2, election of officers. Colleagues, yesterday morning, when we last considered item 2, election of officers, we heard the names of the nominees from 2 of the 3 outstanding regions, and I encouraged the Western European and other states to continue consultations so they would be ready for their nominations this morning. I would like to return to this item now. Western European and other states, are you ready for the nomination? Belgium, you have the floor. Floor to Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, dear colleagues. Belgium has the pleasure to announce that we would nominate for WEOC Bureau member Mrs. Sanne Kruijt of the Netherlands as Bureau member. Mrs. Kruijt holds a Master in International Development Studies from Wageningen University and Research with a focus on environmental policies and sustainable development. She is currently the team coordinator for the International Biodiversity Team at the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality and serves as the focal point for Substa, CBD and IPBES on behalf of the Netherlands. Madam Chair, I here wish to take the opportunity to also thank Mrs. Marina von Weissenberg for her very long stint as Bureau member for WEOG. She has been performing this task in a brilliant and unimitable way, and we thank her very much for her work on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belgium, for your kind words. Colleagues, we have now heard the nominations from all 5 regions, which are as follows. For the African states, the candidate nominated on Monday is Mr. Mustafa Madbouhi from Morocco. For the Asia-Pacific states, the candidate nominated yesterday is Ruliana Susanti of Indonesia. For the Eastern European states, the candidate nominated yesterday is Mr. Jan Plesnik of Czech Republic. For the Latin American and Caribbean states, the candidate nominated on Monday is Ms. Paulina Stojas Salinas of Chile, to be substituted by Ms. Ana Laura Melo of Uruguay for the Cartagena and Nagoya Protocol. For Eastern European and other states, the nominated candidate is Sanne Kruijt of Belgium.
From Netherlands.
From Netherlands, sorry. My apologies. Thank you. It is different than this.
No, they already applied.
If there are no objections, and I don't see any, it is so decided. The new Bureau members are elected. I extend my congratulations to them and invite them to attend the Bureau meetings as observers. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Now I would like to invite Secretariat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The contact group on item 3, the monitoring framework, will continue today. It will start immediately after plenary this afternoon and have a short break for dinner. There is Friends of Chairs meeting on the binary indicator for target 13, which will meet at lunchtime around 1 p.m., and on for target 17 over dinner around 6 p.m. If you are interested in joining, please inform the Secretariat or the lead of Friends of Chairs group, Takazeni Shidata of South Africa for target 13, and Tim Strabala of New Zealand for target 17. Please note that the new issues should be raised in the plenary, not in the contact group. The group will take up the non-paper where they left off yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Now we will continue with item 8. When we ran out of time yesterday, Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the announcement just made by the Secretariat on sessions of the Friends of the Chairs for the monitoring framework, we do notice that the folks are expected to work during lunchtime, dinner time, and then also to engage in the night session of this contact group. We do not think that this is productive and inclusive, as we have been consistently emphasized over the course of those meetings. Brazil reserves the right not to engage those Friends of the Chairs if we feel that this provides overly burdensome for our delegation, and to reopen any text that is agreed upon under those Friends of the Chairs. And once again, we do believe that the way that the process has been handled has not been inclusive and transparent, and we honestly felt that the concerns raised by many developing countries regarding the issue of scheduling overlapping contact groups during formal sessions have not been taken into account by you as chair. So we honestly encouraged the chair of SUBSTA and the Bureau to be more responsive to the concerns raised by developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Brazil, thank you again for your statement. What I wish to say is that all concerns about participation and about timing of contact groups are taken seriously by this Bureau. It was discussion this morning in Bureau about timing of contact groups. So tonight, only one contact group will take place. It is on monitoring framework. On other issue, timing of Friends of Chair groups, I will contact co-chairs of related contact group, and I'll be back with information to you. If this is agreeable, maybe proceed. Microphone to Brazil, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, but I didn't understand how you intend to proceed with regards to the sessions of the Friends of the Chairs. Could you please repeat?
About this issue, we will contact co-chairs of contact group because they established Friends of the Chair of this contact group. Then, with information, I'll be back to you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to mention that Brazil flagged this issue yesterday during the session of the contact group as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Now we will continue with item 8. So if you remember, we had yesterday night before session was adjourned, the list of 28 countries, which I have here from yesterday. Now I will call country by country from the same list to give their interventions on item 8 in the way that we did yesterday. First on my list is Germany, followed by Cuba. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. We would like to comment on both marine agenda items. Germany welcomes the draft recommendations on agenda item 8A on EPSAS and 8B on the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. While the recommendations are a promising foundation for the upcoming CBD discussions, Germany would like to stress that through the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework and the BBNJ Agreement, the international community has created a significant momentum for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity. Now it is crucial to use this momentum to make substantive progress in the conservation and protection of our oceans. We must not forget that, among many other things, the world's oceans provide the foundation of livelihoods for millions of people, harbor an immense wealth of species and ecosystems, and are crucial for the mitigation of the effects of climate change. Thus, we as CBD should take on our responsibility to ensure healthy oceans and take the necessary actions to protect their biodiversity, timely and effectively. Therefore, Germany is looking forward to constructive discussions on the two marine items, focusing on the scientific and technical aspects, and we stand ready to work jointly on ambitious recommendations that comprehensively address the threats and pressures the oceans and the marine biodiversity are currently facing. To support this, Germany has some comments on the recommendations 8A and 8B, and that are being provided in writing by Belgium as presidency of the European Union. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Germany. Cuba, followed by Spain.
Muchas gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everybody. First of all, we would like to thank you for the documents presented for this topic and the work conducted by the expert group and the Secretariat. On 8A, further work for EBSAs. Cuba supports the recommendation as set out, in particular that related to the extension of the mandate of the informal advisory group on EBSAs and on adopting the modalities for the modification of descriptions of EBSAs and the description of new areas. We believe that it's of vital importance that we have synergies, coherencies and coordination between this process in the CBD relating to EBSAs and the implementation of the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, BBNJ. On item 8B, sustainable conservation use of marine and coastal biodiversity, we have to recognize that there are many areas in programs of work on marine and coastal biodiversity and island biodiversity which are not fully implemented at present. Therefore, the message on the need to create capacity, technology transfer, and have sufficient financial resources for effective implementation should be strengthened in the wording of the draft decision, in particular for small island developing states. there are definitely some elements in the targets of the framework, but the guidance offered is limited. In general, we support some elements set out in the annex of the draft decision, but in line with our characteristics and the extreme events which we are seeing increasing throughout the world due to climate change, for Cuba there are certain topics of vital importance which should be reflected as a priority manner, such as those relating to the restoration of marine and coastal ecosystems and the improvement of resilience of ecosystems which are very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Cuba. Spain, you have the floor, followed by Egypt.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. On document Subster 26/7/add1, Spain would like to make the following general comments. Since 2014, the Conference of the Parties to the CBD has been discussing the way to, or the best way to improve the process to describe EBSAs. However, we have not yet reached, at present, an agreement on that. Therefore, Spain welcomes the progress made in the scientific and technical processes of EBSAs, in particular, the 2 reports from the technical and legal workshops held in Oslo, and the report of the 4th meeting of the Informal Advisory Group on EBSAs. In addition, Spain welcomes the draft decision contained in document on EBSAs and supports the use of this text as the basis for negotiations during Subster 26. Spain in particular supports recognition of the importance of EBSAs for the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework and the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. Now on Subster 26/7, Spain would like to make the following comments. Spain welcomes the draft decision set out in the document, Subster 26/7, sustainable conservation and use of marine and coastal biological diversity, and recognises the importance of marine and coastal biodiversity as one of the main cross-cutting elements of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Spain recognises the need to strengthen cooperation and collaboration with other competent intergovernmental organisations, including organisations with competence in areas beyond national jurisdiction, in support of the sustainable conservation and use of marine and coastal biodiversity. In this manner, Spain also welcomes the reference to the adoption of the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine and biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, and supports a call for parties and an invitation to other governments to sign and ratify this as soon as possible. In addition, Spain is aware of and recognises the severe threats faced by oceans, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, acidification of oceans, invasive alien species, unsustainable fishing, and pollution. Therefore, we support stronger language which would refer to the magnitude of the challenges for marine and coastal ecosystems, highlighting this throughout the draft decision. We have sent in writing to the Secretariat our proposal for changes to the draft decision as contained in documents which we referred to. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. Egypt, you have the floor, followed by Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, our colleagues. First of all, Egypt support statements already given by Zimbabwe on 8.1 on the conservation of and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, as well as South Africa on EBSA. So Egypt are in favor or dealing with the 8.1 or 8A and 8B. Having said that, Madam Chair, when you look at the issue of marine and coastal biodiversity, we noticed that because of the importance of this issue, 3 decisions were adopted in COP 15. 24 on conservation and sustainable use, 25 on EPSA, 26 on further work for EPSA. That means that this subject, marine and coastal marine biodiversity, represent what we call key crossing cutting elements that are very, very important for GBF. Why? Because there is a wide range of issues that they dealt with. The work program deal with conservation, cooperation, collaboration, capacity building, partnerships, and many, many, many other issues like the debris, like the light noise, like invasive species, so much work. After almost 20 years, when the work program started in 1998 until now, there was a need to review all of the work. And that's why this important issue needed this strategic review for the work program and all of the numerous guidance that already provided over the years. This strategic review covered many, many issues, whether it's program of work, COP decision, previous COP decisions, key priorities, extent of elements to GBF as well, important gaps that needed to be addressed, and guidance to GBF. That's why it is very important to look at the annex with all of these gaps and provided recommendations. Most of these recommendations, in addition to approval or welcoming the new treaty and others, they are directed actually to the Secretary, Executive Secretary, in a way that they request them to enhance cooperation and many, many other activities as well. When you consider the importance of these items in relation to the GBF, Madam Chair, almost all of the work of the conservation of marine and coastal areas are relevant to GBF. Almost all targets, all 23 targets, we can call them, all of them together, they can be of very, very valuable priorities for this very important program. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. Turkey, you have the floor, followed by Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to speak both items and would like to start with agenda item 8A document. We would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm that Turkey agrees with the general intent of the UNCLOS and with most of its provisions, including particularly those related to protection of the marine environment and sustainable use of oceans and their resources. But Turkey is not a party to UNCLOS and has consistently expressed that it doesn't agree with the view that this convention has a universal and unified character. We also maintain that the UNCLOS is not the only legal framework which regulates all activities in the ocean and seas. In this regard, we propose to delete Para 2 in the preamble. We acknowledge the position of those states that attach importance to protecting the integrity of UNCLOS in the process for modification and description of EPSAs. On the other hand, it is equally important to be open to ideas and proposals that will create enabling conditions for fully integrating all parties to the new processes for modification and description of EPSAs under the CBD, regardless of their non-party status to UNCLOS. As a compromise solution, we would like to propose the addition of a footnote to preamble Para 2 of the document, as it was stated at COP14 and also COP15. We also believe that EPSAs are a scientific and technical exercise, and the modification and description of EPSAs should not prejudice countries' position in disputes regarding their sovereign rights or in disputes regarding the delimitation of maritime areas. In addition, we suggest that Para 4 of the annex, which contains fundamental elements for the EPSA process, should be moved to the preamble of the draft recommendation. We also consider that the reasons for modifying existing EPSAs should only be scientific, and same for areas within and beyond national jurisdiction in terms of the interest of consistency and to keep the scientific integrity of the EPSA process. As is well known, the Secretariat should not interpret borders and determine whether there is a dispute or claim related to sovereignty or jurisdiction. Therefore, with respect to notifications, we strongly believe that both notifications should be mandatory so that parties could make their objection in line with para 4 of the Annex in a timely manner. We strongly believe that we need to differentiate the methodology for existing EPSAs endorsed by COP and description of new areas in terms of ICM-PET for national jurisdiction modalities. Furthermore, the ICM-PET for national jurisdiction should not be applied to modification of the existing CBD EPSAs endorsed by COP. From the very beginning of the process, we have clearly stated that modification of the existing EPSAs straddling 2 or more national jurisdictions should work together on one submission that addresses the ecological features as a whole. In addition, we want the document to be considered as a whole, include both legal and technical aspects of EPSAs, and the parties to be given enough time to reflect all their views regarding the draft recommendation in the SAPSTA meeting. In that regard, Turkey is not a position to accept your suggestion regarding deferring the legal matters are included in the draft recommendation for consideration of COP16. As regards agenda item 8A document, our views may not be shrunk to 3 minutes restriction. In our view, we should discuss these matters properly. Therefore, we would like to be able to give our interventions on both legal and technical aspects of EPSA process at their own place. We think that SAPSTA may establish contact group to address these needs and for text-based negotiations. In this context, our text proposal...
Turkey,
okay, I am finishing. Okay.
It's not only this, then about translation. Interpreters can take everything what you say.
Sorry.
And if you may be aware of time.
I couldn't hear very well.
Please conclude your intervention and
Okay.
slowly.
Okay, thank you. In this context, our text proposal and interventions regarding agenda item 8A and 8B will be sent to Secretariat in written form. We also would like to take the floor later reflecting our views regarding agenda item 8A document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Turkey. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor, followed by Morocco.
شكرا سيدة الرئيسة.
Good morning, Madam Chair. The determination, the definition of these particular regions is of great importance for us, particularly since we know that water and seas, the open seas, can be the richest in terms of the diversity, biological diversity. So therefore, determining and defining these regions is of such crucial importance, and this would then allow us to be able to make sure that they are used appropriately. And this is a preamble for conserving and protecting those areas beyond national jurisdiction. We need to know very clearly and precisely what are the responsibilities, what is the mandate in terms of protecting the areas beyond national jurisdiction, and what are the provisions taken. This would allow us to enrich our knowledge in terms of defining these regions and strengthening their protection. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. Morocco, you have the floor, followed by Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The Kingdom of Morocco supports Zimbabwe and South Africa, speaking on behalf of the African Group. With regard to 8A on the agenda, we take note with satisfaction of the annex concerning the modalities for modifying the description of areas which are of importance for biodiversity and of new areas that are contained in 7 Add 1. However, the reformulation of this in paragraph 2, it would be opportune to make sure that marine areas are included and to propose some modifications to the existing descriptions or to introduce new marine areas beyond national jurisdiction with regard to paragraph 3. And a further clarification is required in terms of the regional dimension of coastal areas, as well as the need to collaborate between regions by taking into account the disparities between the availability of data as far as the modification of the description of the marine areas, the biological importance, and the description of new areas. It is suggested that we clarify the density of the parties that are to ask for, make requests of changes of these by specifying whether these are individuals, organizations, regional groups, scientists, or other collective groups. With regard to item B of Substa 26, the Kingdom of Morocco asks that we align with the decisions on biological and marine areas and ask for consistency with other agreements within the United Nations fora. We encourage collaboration and technical and scientific cooperation as an efficient manner to ensure the conservation of marine and coastal areas, as well as for the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We ask that we work hard on the targets which have not yet been looked at in the work program regarding, for example, pollution and invasive alien species and the role of climate change in all of this. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Morocco. Brazil, you have the floor, followed by Djibouti.
Thank you, Chair. As a cross-cutting concern, Brazil would like to recall that the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas provides a legal framework for the conservation and sustainable use of oceans and their resources, as recalled in paragraph 158 of the Future We Want document. Given the central role of UNCLOS, we understand that any efforts to improve cooperation and coordination between CBD and other intergovernmental organizations must be consistent with existing mandates and relevant international obligations, and must take into account Article 4.A of CBD. I'll now draw attention to item 8.A in document 26/7 at 1. We appreciate the progress that has been made. At the same time, we take note that the views expressed by Brazilian experts during the technical and legal expert workshops were not considered in the preparation of the modalities for modifying the descriptions of abscess and of new abscess. From our perspective, the procedures for modification or of descriptions of abscess within national jurisdiction and the descriptions of new areas within national jurisdiction should be implemented in line with UNCLOS, including the sovereign rights recognized by Article 76 of the Convention. This clarification should be duly considered in the document to ensure consistency with international law, and will be providing language in that regard. We are not in a position to accept OP7 of the draft decision, as we understand that abscess are a technical and scientific exercise and should not preempt or prejudge decisions to be made by the BBNJ process once the BBNJ agreement enters into force. I'll now draw attention to item 8.B. Regarding OP3 of the draft decision under document 26/7, Brazil understands that given the heavy workload under the convention, it would be premature to develop additional guidance materials, and we would prefer a more flexible approach, focused on the census of good practices. With regards to OPs 4 and 6, we would suggest adding reference to technical and scientific cooperation and technology transfer. On OP8, we take note with concern that the modalities for collaboration and cooperation identified in paragraph 27 seem to assign to the CBD Secretariat a prominent role in the implementation of the BBNJ agreement, thus preempting discussions that are yet to take place under BBNJ. Therefore, we are not in a position to endorse those proposals. Regarding the annexes on potential gaps, we understand that the language should be revised to maintain coherence with the KM GPF. We will submit a number of written comments. We highlight the absence of gaps related to Target 13 and the need of actions to ensure the benefit sharing from marine genetic resources, including DSI, and protect traditional knowledge. Furthermore,
Brazil, I'm just asking for speaking slowly.
Okay. Furthermore, efforts to address pollution in deep sea ecosystems under paragraph 1.g need to be consistent with the jurisdictional scope of the Convention. We will further suggest deleting the reference to blue carbon ecosystems, as there is current debate regarding the application of this concept as recognized by the IPCC 6th Assessment Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Djibouti, you have the floor, followed by Sudan.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. The Republic of Djibouti supports the declaration made by Zimbabwe and South Africa for the African Group on 8A and 8B on the agenda. We will now intervene on point 8B. We are pleased to see this document, particularly D, for a list of strategies for the programme of work on marine and coastal areas and the programme of work on island biodiversity. The point 14E is to enlarge the programme on other areas, as, for example, different types of pollution. Madam Chair, we are worried about the different types of pollution and their risks on biodiversity, both marine and coastal, throughout the world, and in particular in the Red Sea. The Red Sea is most used by international trade, and that region is rich in biological diversity and has coral reefs which are unique. It is also very important for international maritime trade. Beyond this, it is also crucial for expeditions with regard to oil and gas, and therefore should be given particular interest to reduce the risk relating to different types of pollution. Madam Chair, my country is situated in that part of the world and has been confronted over the last few years by environmental crises in our ecosystem. We have taken urgent measures to protect our coastal and marine areas. But however, our capacity for intervention in terms of Black Seas are difficult for us to implement, and we would like to see capacity building strengthened, and we ask for South-South cooperation and experience, as well as North-South cooperation, as we have seen in Sustainable Seas and other initiatives which are encouraging. We would like to encourage financial institutions which have expertise in this area to allow parties who are members of the CBD to be able to work more on these issues and on initiatives and Target 7 relating to biodiversity. With this document in particular in its annexes, we propose to include the importance of the blue carbon ecosystems, and we will send our comments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Djibouti. Sudan, you have the floor, followed by Gabon.
شكرا السيدة الرئيسة.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Sudan would like to pay tribute to the work carried out by the Secretariat with regard to the subject under discussion. We'd also like to express our support for the statement made by Zimbabwe and South Africa on behalf of the African Group, and I would like to quote here under item 8A and 8B with regard to conservation of marine and coastal areas. Madam Chair, biological diversity in marine and coastal areas is of great importance given the great biological diversity there is, and contribute significantly to Vision 2030 for sustainable development. This requires, amongst other things, resources, financial resources, as well as cooperation, technology transfer, the sharing of knowledge, taking into account restoration, conservation of these marine areas. We'd also like to highlight the importance of having those areas which are threatened and those which are of great importance in terms of marine biodiversity, marine and coastal biodiversity. The coral reefs continue to be threatened in terms of biodiversity. We therefore must make sure that we have the relevant capacity to be able to protect them. and include them in our national plans, which are being implemented currently as far as protection and sustainable use of these marine and coastal areas. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sudan. Gabon, you have the floor, followed by New Zealand.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Gabon would like to express its views on 8A and 8B. 8A on the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. We support what was said by South Africa. We also take note of all of the initiatives and the technical work that's been carried out since the beginning of the process, which was begun in 2008 since the adoption of the criteria for the identification of important coastal and marine areas and those which require protection. However, while we thank the Secretariat of CBD for the preparation of this information document, we would like to express our concern with regard to the complexity of the annex on the modalities for modifying the descriptions of the biologically significant marine areas and new areas as presented in document 26.7 at 1. In this regard, Gabon supports the point of view on the need to continue work on this process, and therefore we recommend that we draw up a simplified document on the modalities proposed within the Annex to 7 at 1. With regard to achieving Target 3, Madam Chair, Gabon is a very committed country in terms of the realization of Target 3, and this was before the adoption of this. In seeking to make sure that Target 3 of the global mandate is carried out, all of the tools that are developed should not be as complex as they currently are. To conclude on this point, we support the recommendation relating to the extension of the consultative group, the informal advisory group. We support the position presented by Zimbabwe yesterday for the African group. We would also like to highlight the importance of having technological assistance by transfer of competence to these countries. With regard to the annex to the document 27.7 on the gaps which need supplementary care with regard to coastal and marine areas as well as island areas, this annex does not contain any provision relating to the mobilization of financial resources, and in that regard, Gabon proposes the following amendment to that annex. M, to ensure mobilization of funds in order to improve the knowledge of in island areas where they are not yet well understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabon. New Zealand, you have the floor, followed by Greece.
Thank you, Madam Chair. New Zealand will comment on both marine items. On item 8A, New Zealand thanks the Secretariat for their work on the ecologically or biologically significant marine areas and the role and contributions of the expert workshops. We recognise the robust and important science behind the development of EBSAs and the potential for this work to inform the implementation of both the Global Biodiversity Framework and the UNCLOS Agreement on biologically diverse areas beyond national jurisdiction. We are supportive of modalities that provide for more flexibility in amending boundaries and describing new areas through means other than regional workshops. We support the adoption of the modalities as outlined in the annex to the draft recommendation. It is New Zealand's view that adopting these modalities will continue to support parties in their efforts to meet 2030 targets, whilst ensuring this is done using the most up-to-date and best available science. On item 8B, New Zealand thanks the Secretariat for their work in preparing the gap analysis in the annex to Subster 26/7. We agree the Secretariat must facilitate sharing of best practices, more guidance and capacity building in both of these important work programs, particularly in the areas identified in the annex to the recommendation. It is critical these gaps are addressed by collaborating with other relevant intergovernmental organisations and multilateral environmental agreements according to their respective mandates and competencies. This will ensure that any existing tools and guidance are utilised effectively and duplication is avoided. Similar to our points in 8A, New Zealand suggests that parties work together to avoid further delays on any marine decision and adopt the annex as it stands. With regard to the text of the draft recommendation, we have some minor comments which we will submit to the Secretariat in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, New Zealand. Grace, you have the floor, followed by Portugal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greece fully aligns itself with the intervention made by Belgium regarding agenda items 8A and 8B. Concerning agenda item 8A, we strongly support the reference to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea in the preamble of the decision regarding the further work on the EPSAs. We would also like to stress the importance of respecting the sovereignty, sovereign rights and jurisdiction of the coastal states. Finally, we support the clear distinction between the repository and the information sharing mechanism. Lastly, we take this opportunity to thank participants of more than 130 countries and organizations who attended our ocean conference hosted by Greece last April. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Grace. Portugal, you have the floor, followed by Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start by saying that Portugal supports the statement made by Belgium yesterday on both agenda items. On agenda item A, Portugal welcomes the work of the Secretariat and believes that the document provided is an excellent basis for our discussions. We believe that further work on EPSAs is fundamental and that the momentum created by the adoption of the KMGBF and the BBNJ must be seized and to strive to finally reach an agreement on how to improve the process to define EPSAs. EPSA information is fundamental to fill knowledge gaps in the marine environment, being also indispensable to implement the KMGBF, in particular Target 3. Additionally, Portugal considers that EPSAs will be an integral part of informing the BBNJ agreement. For this reason, this delegation believes that the scientific and technical process to define EPSAs must be practical, accurate, and up-to-date. Finally, on this agenda item, this delegation also supports the extension of the term of the informal advisory group. However, and following the practice of a body with intergovernmental nature, this delegation believes that the decision of postponing the drafting of voluntary guidelines on peer review processes should be reflected in the recommendation if parties agree to do so. On agenda item 8B, Madam Chair, Portugal believes that the magnitude of the challenge to the ocean will only be addressed through cooperation and collaboration through all actors. Synergies with our other MEAs, global and regional organizations are fundamental, and on this matter we would like to once again underline the contribution that the Convention can give to the implementation of the BBNJ agreement, while respecting, of course, the rhythm of its preparatory process and the decisions made by the future governing bodies of this agreement. Still on this regard of cooperation and collaboration, Portugal would be pleased to see a reference to UNEA Resolution 6/18, on the recommendation from this body to the COP. Madam Chair, Portugal recognizes the importance of good inland water quality and sustainable water resource management as an important requisite for biodiversity in marine and coastal areas. In this regard, Portugal welcomes the new UN system-wide strategy mandated through UN Resolution 77/334 for water and sanitation, and supports its uptake in all relevant resolutions in order to increase collaboration and cooperation on tackling water and sanitation-related challenges impacting marine and coastal biodiversity. Additionally, this delegation will also propose text on the inclusion of the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal areas in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, as well as on priority actions for coral reefs and closely associated ecosystems. To finalize, Madam Chair, this delegation would also like to underline the importance of guaranteeing the meaningful engagement and participation of local and coastal communities, in particular artisanal fishermen, women, youth, indigenous people, and all other relevant stakeholders. For this, the language should be strengthened. Our proposals will be provided in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Portugal. Republic of Korea, followed by Colombia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us the floor. We have comments on both items. Regarding item 8A, the Republic of Korea supports the original purpose of the EPSA to conserve global marine biodiversity and ensure its sustainable use. At the same time, we would like to highlight the need for prior consultation, rigorous peer reviews, and agreements among the parties involved before any modification or new description of EPSAs are approved. The submission of modification or new description of EPSAs by a single party and the exposure of this information through an information sharing mechanism without objective verification by potentially affected countries could lead to unintended negative consequences for those countries despite the scientific nature of EPSA designations. In this regard, we emphasize the importance of having a process in place which ensures concerned parties are notified well in advance and allows a regional or sub-regional consensus before any submission is posted to the information sharing mechanism. We'd like now to turn to item 8B. As a maritime nation, Korea places great importance on the biodiversity of marine and coastal areas. We are well aware from our own experience, capacity building is a cornerstone of the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. This is why Korea has been actively and continuously involved in the development of Sustainable Ocean Initiative, or SOI, since its inception. Since 2015, Korea has co-hosted various SOI activities, such as SOI Training of Trainers Program, SOI Capacity Building Workshops, and SOI Global Dialogue, together with the Secretariat. This year, the first meeting of SOI Global Dialogue will be held in Seoul, Korea, from June 11 to 14. Leaders of regional seas organizations and regional fisheries bodies are expected to attend the meeting, which will serve as a platform for discussion and collaboration on the conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity under Kunming-Montreal GBF and the BBNJ agreement. To this end, Korea will continue to support SOI to better conserve biodiversity in marine and coastal regions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. Colombia, you have the floor, followed by Singapore.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Colombia recognized the importance of marine and coastal biodiversity as one of the principal cross-cutting issues of the biodiversity framework, and this is required for the achievement of our aims. Under item 8A, we recognize the intrinsic relationship between the targets and the implementation of the biological convention, and this is of a transcendental importance for all of the member states. We would like to ask for more exchange of information with regard to the use and information of marine and of biologically significant marine areas, and include the knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities for the use of mechanisms.
Slowly, please.
And management mechanisms on geographical areas with the aim of contributing to the biodiversity framework. As far as 8B is concerned, we would like to have clear understanding of the form in which the biologically significant marine areas could contribute to the implementation of the framework, and of 8J and the modalities for the modification descriptions of these marine areas of biological significance. We would like to note the revisions and the aims on marine biodiversity and the work program on islands. And we would like to make an appeal to have concrete mechanisms to be able to look at the gaps and deficits that require additional intentions, that we can make sure that we harmonize these with the targets of the framework, and different types of pollution, for example, and fighting against invasive alien species, and including gender, and the effective management of blue carbon ecosystems. The protection of these areas in terms of conservation based on geographical areas, and promoting preservation of these areas which can contribute to resilience to climate change. In conclusion, Colombia would like to highlight the important role of indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, and local communities in the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal areas. Mangroves, for example, amongst these. The practices of these communities have been key in order to make sure that they deal with issues relating to, for example, chemical pollution, plastic pollution, and non-regulated tourism, amongst others, and we would like to provide you with additional comments in writing to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. Singapore, you have the floor, followed by Cameroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Singapore's intervention is on Agenda Item 8A on EPSAS. We wish to express our thanks to the Secretariat and to the participants of the technical and legal expert workshops for the useful work done in progressing discussions on the draft modalities for modifying the description of EPSAS and describing new areas, as found in CBD/26/7/1. We note that the latest draft modalities text has been revised significantly. It has been streamlined to now comprise only one annex rather than multiple annexes. We welcome this streamlined version and are happy to continue discussion on this revised text. We note, however, that there are some issues which require further discussion and clarification. For example, it is not immediately clear what the applicable process is for EPSAS that 1. Straddle multiple national jurisdictions, and 2. Straddle areas both within and beyond national jurisdictions. In particular, for EPSAS that straddle multiple national jurisdictions, it is unclear to us whether the current paragraph 2B of the annex allows one state to unilaterally propose a modification or new description of EPSAS. If so, this is of concern to Singapore. We suggest that paragraph 2B be revised to read, for areas within national jurisdiction, all states within whose jurisdictions the modification or description is proposed. We will provide this proposal in writing, and Singapore looks forward to participating in continued discussions on EPSAS. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Singapore. Cameroon, you have the floor, followed by Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I have the honour of representing Cameroon, and we'd just like to make a few points on what we're discussing. I'll start by noting that I'm referring to 8B, and it will also perhaps cover 8A as well, because we will also cover the draft recommendation contained in document subcert 26/7. We'd like to express our total support to the statement made by Zimbabwe and South Africa on behalf of the African Group. Chair, we have one question and one proposal. First of all, our question refers to the wording in the draft recommendation, and I would quote that: the best scientifically available data. We would like to know whether there are one or more criteria which enable to determine or to distinguish the best available scientific data from those which are not the best. Without waiting for the response immediately for that question, we have a suggestion. If those criteria do exist, it would be desirable to note them in a footnote, if they are not many, and perhaps give the reference to any related literature. If not, we would suggest to very simply delete the word best. So you understand as well, Chair, we want to, of course, use the best available data. The issue for us is to ensure that we have criteria for which we have a consensus in terms of our understanding. Along those lines then, Chair, our suggestion would be to consider the best data, any data which is cited at least 5 times in scientific publications. However, of course, we need to clarify the notions of scientific data and scientific publications. To this end, then, we have made proposals in our statement which has been uploaded in writing and which we are proud to share. Those definitions refer to the proposal by the OECD on scientific data, or research data, and other definitions which are found in literature on what a scientific publication is. And all those definitions are contained in our written statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cameron. Australia, you have the floor, followed by India.
Thank you, Chair. On 8A, Australia welcomes the opportunity for the parties to finalise these modalities for new and updated EBSAs, which has been a long-standing agenda item. We support the updates to the modalities to describe EBSAs and hope that this draft decision can be sent to COP16 without delay, as we see the scientific and technical information which supports the description of an EBSA an important scientific tool for BBNJ and for marine protected areas, which will of course ensure significant contributions to Target 3 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We would support the insertions to acknowledge IPLCs and traditional knowledge as proposed by Canada. On 8B, as a mega-diverse country and an island, we, like Fiji, would welcome completion of work on outstanding issues on marine and coastal biodiversity, and in particular, island biodiversity, including the need to enhance capacity building for our many developing island state neighbours, which often get overlooked in lieu of other marine biodiversity conservation-based issues, including EBSAs. This said, we note the need to avoid duplication with other marine biodiversity agreements, and any work pursued in this space should work collaboratively and cooperatively to maximise efforts in marine and coastal conservation. In the wise words of one Bryan Adams, everything I do it for you. Or in the case of our work, we do what we can to protect our oceans, which make up most of our world. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. India, you have the floor, followed by Laos.
Thank you, Chair. The submission will be for both the item 8A and 8B. India appreciates the effort made by experts in the technical working group to review the technical aspects of the modalities for modifying the description of EBSA and describing new areas. We support the advice given by the informal advisory group to strengthen the use of EBSAs as a key element in revising or updating national biodiversity strategies and implementing national, regional, and global action plan through respective national regulatory and institutional frameworks as laid down in this regard. For description of an area beyond national jurisdiction, an appropriate institutional mechanism may be put in place with the consent of the concerned national governments, as it requires extensive stakeholder consultation for resolving multiple and cross-sectoral issues. It is important to have an in-depth understanding of the science and its application behind the modalities, and therefore capacity building is crucial beside access to other elements of means of implementation. India recognizes the importance of welfare of coastal communities that depend on marine resources for livelihood and their sustenance, with ingrained ethos and sustainable practices for utilization of resource and ecosystem services. Balance between conservation goals and livelihood of coastal community needs to be maintained. We note the necessity of scaling the efforts and sharing of best practices in ecological restoration, including promotion of alternative livelihoods, option to address the human-wildlife conflicts. The sovereignty rights of members of sustainable management of fisheries within their national jurisdictions, as provided under the clause, needs to be duly recognized and protected. Harmful subsidies should be built in on the principle of national circumstances and priorities. Specific to Para 32B4 of CBD Substar 26/7, India emphasized inclusion of developing countries. Some emerging issues proposed for inclusion in program of work like blue carbon ecosystem, impact of light pollution may require greater attention and scientific evidence-based support to have a better understanding of the issue involved. India underscores the importance of capacity building and technology transfer to developing nations for effective monitoring activity and collaborative scientific research on deep sea and high sea biodiversity, and also need to study the impact of pollution and light pollution. India will submit its written proposal for amendment in 8A and 8B. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. Lao People's Democratic Republic, followed by South Africa.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, for giving this opportunity. It is my first time to be in this important meeting. First of all, Lao PDR would like to support all statements made by the party, in particular the statement delivered by Nepal yesterday. Lao PDR recognizes marine and coastal and inland biodiversity both play important role in supporting a healthy environment and human health and well-being. In order to contribute to the marine plastic pollution, Lao PDR is currently in the finalization process of the development of the National Plastic Action Plan. However, as a landlocked country, Lao PDR would like to propose that the conservation and sustainable use of inland biodiversity be also addressed and discussed in future meetings of SAPTA, where relevant and appropriate, as this has been specified in certain targets of Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Madam Chairperson, I would like to conclude my statement by saying, like many other landlocked countries, Lao PDR is rich in biodiversity, in particular herbal and or medical plant species. Lao PDR would like to take this opportunity to welcome any kinds of collaboration on capacity building, knowledge and experience sharing, research and development, as well as technology transfer associated with the conservation and sustainable use of inland biodiversity, in particular the medical plant species. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lao People's Democratic Republic. South Africa, you have the floor, followed by Italy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. South Africa takes the stand to support the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of Africa yesterday. South Africa supports the request to convene an expert workshop on opportunities for scientific and technical work conducted under the Convention to inform the implementation of the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. South Africa supports the view that the program of work on marine and coastal biodiversity, together with relevant decision on the Conference of Parties, still corresponds to global priorities and can provide essential support for the implementation of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. South Africa has reviewed and supports the list of gaps and areas in need of additional focus provided in the annex, which are additional to guidance that has been developed on important aspects such as marine spatial planning, anthropogenic underwater noise, and marine debris. However, South Africa has specific comments on the framing of some of the priorities where further efforts are needed, as contained in the annexure. These comments shall be provided in writing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Italy, you have the floor, followed by Chile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In my intervention, I will refer to Agenda Item 8B. Italy firmly believes in the key role of the BB&J agreement in achieving the global targets related to ocean protection, conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. In particular, the target to effectively conserve and manage at least 30% of coastal and marine areas by 2030, as set in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity. As we all know, reaching the minimum of 6 instruments of ratification, approval, acceptance, or accession is essential to ensure the entry into force of the BB&J and its implementation. To this end, Italy is proud to announce the adoption under its G7 presidency during the Climate, Energy and Environment Ministers meeting of last 30 April of a joint declaration committing G7 to pursue the swift ratification, approval, acceptance and accession of the BB&J agreement at the earliest date possible, endeavoring to do so by the third United Nations Ocean Conference to be held in Nice, France in June 2025, thus hopefully contributing to keep the momentum high and speed up the process. Along with this approach, Madam Chair, we believe the CBD context, and in particular the decision on marine biodiversity under discussion this week, provides the right opportunity not only to welcome the success represented by the recent adoption of the instrument as a landmark achievement.
Italy, may I ask you to speak slowly, please?
Sure, sorry. We believe the CBD context, and in particular the decision on marine biodiversity under discussion this week, provides the right opportunity not only to welcome the success represented by the recent adoption of the instrument as a landmark achievement in the context of ocean governance, but also to convey a call to parties and other governments to work towards its swift ratification as a strong positive signal from the biodiversity community on this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Italy. Chile, you have the floor, followed by Finland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chile thanks the work and result achieved by the technical and legal expert group. Like other distinguished delegations, Chile agrees to adopt the modalities to modify existing EPSAs and describe new areas. We agree with the intervention made by Mexico yesterday, especially regarding on keeping the precautionary approach, and reaffirm our commitment to restrict marine geoengineering projects. Chile believes that it's positive the coherent work between conventions and other legal frameworks. In that line, Chile was one of the first countries to sign and ratify the BB&J agreement, and we encourage other states to sign and ratify as soon as possible this agreement. There are many areas of work under CBD that can support the application of the ecosystem approach in areas beyond the national jurisdiction of BB&J. We are confident this agreement will be fundamental to achieve the coming Montreal GBF goals and targets, especially Target 3. However, we consider it is necessary to ensure that the legal frameworks should be applied consistently and coherently, avoiding duplicity. Chile also strongly advocates for the establishment of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, underscoring the reality that the current environmental crisis stemming from climate change, loss of biodiversity, and pollution are global issues that require a coordinated and collaborative response from all international across and legal framework. Additionally, we emphasize the importance of fostering synergies among these efforts to enhance efficiency and impact. Finally, we highlight the importance of promoting and financing capacity building, especially in developing countries. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chile. Finland, you have the floor, followed by France as last party requesting for the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to speak for both items. Regarding item 8A, Finland thanks for the work done by the two workshops to review modalities for modifying the descriptions of EPSAs and describing new areas. Finland supports the Belgian proposals. Some clarifications are needed, and thereafter we should approve the recommendations and the annex. We feel that this is now the time to agree and decide on this matter at COP16 and proceed with this issue, especially looking at the upcoming BBNG agreement. Regarding item 8b, we thank the Secretariat for excellent background included in documents. This is a major step forward. Finland supports the intervention given by Belgium. Finland proposes to include a para in the preamble that highlights the strengthening of the cooperation with intergovernmental organizations and especially with regional seas conventions. Regarding gaps, pollution and climate change is a growing threat to marine biodiversity. With regard to Annex on gaps, we propose to add under para F light pollution and other electromagnetic radiation as gaps that needs more attention and to be recognized as threats. As threats to many species globally. Studies show that light pollution is impacting animal behaviors such as migration patterns, wake sleep habits, and habitat formation. But there is still a need to have more information on these effects on light pollution to species and measures to mitigate the effects as well as to spread information about these pollutions. Bottom-dwelling fish such as cage due to combined electrosensitivity and a bottom-dwelling life history are most likely to encounter electromagnetic fields from undersea power cables associated with offshore wind energy projects. We need, in addition to cumulative impacts, also look at less known impacts individually and assess these scientifically. Under Iceland biodiversity, we support to include land and sea interactions in para A, as we should look at the whole, which are linked through terrestrial, marine, coastal, freshwater, and catchment areas and their interactions. Regarding para D on invasive alien species, Finland considers that there is a need to take actions at the same time concerning both eradication as well as controlling of invasive species. We will hand in our text proposals in writing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Finland. Franz, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Chair. France fully supports the statement made by Belgium. We would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the draft recommendations and relevant documents, both for EBSAs and for marine and coastal biodiversity. And our statement will focus mainly on agenda item 8b. In particular, France would like to insist upon the need to strengthen cooperation and the restoration of the most vulnerable marine coastal ecosystems, such as coral reefs and blue carbon ecosystems. This is part of our renewed national biodiversity strategy, where we want to fully protect our coral reefs by 2030. We think it's essential also to strengthen cooperation and collaboration with competent intergovernmental organizations and conventions, and to anticipate the entry into force of the BBNJ agreement. We would like to include this in the recommendations emerging from Subset 26, and this goes in line with Decision 1524 from COP15, strengthening cooperation between competent intergovernmental organizations linked directly or indirectly to the ocean will be one of the priorities for the United Nations Oceans Conference, which France will organize with Costa Rica in Nice, in France, in June 2025. While multilateral governance of the oceans is fragmented and dispersed between several international organizations and conventions, we support the work of the CBD on a sustainable ocean initiative and recognize in particular the role of the United Nations Environment Programme and regional seas conventions for the implementation of global objectives at the regional level. Like Italy, we also call for, as quickly as possible, the entry into force of the BBNJ agreements, if possible, before the United Nations Oceans Conference in June 2025. France would also propose some text on resource mobilization for the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal framework on marine aspects and the implementation of SDG 14 on aquatic life as set out by the Belgian presidency of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Here I have an additional list of countries requesting for the floor. Fiji, Algeria, Oman, and Canada. And we know it is about one of sub-items in this agenda item. I would like to ask parties, to upload their statements and continue discussion in contact group, which probably will be established on this item. Now I would like to proceed with IPLC and major groups. If I may ask microphone to 705, youth. Youth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network on item 8B. We support the statements made earlier and we are crossing, sorry. So, delegates, young people around the world in all their diversity are living in, living with, and living as the ocean. Young fisherfolk, indigenous youth, young scientists, children, and youth living in coastal areas, and young people everywhere are key partners in ensuring a healthy and thriving marine and coastal biodiversity. Regarding the documents under review, we highlight the importance of engaging youth, as well as indigenous peoples, local communities, and women in capacity building efforts such as the Sustainable Ocean Initiative, and this is necessary for us to all together achieve the goals and targets of the biodiversity plan. We wish to highlight that a number of key issues that could greatly impact marine and coastal biodiversity, as well as the island biodiversity, are missing from the gap analysis, including the increasing threat for deep sea mining and marine geoengineering. With regard to document subster/26/7, we call to attention that in paragraph 14E, subparagraph 3, the strategic review and analysis of the programs of work identified the need for the robust engagement of a broader range of stakeholders as an aspect that is essential to the implementation of the framework in the respective biomes, but not yet addressed in the programs of work. We point out that this aspect is missing in the annex that lists the gaps and areas in need of additional focus under the Convention with regard to marine, coastal, and island biodiversity. We therefore propose to add the following point as a subparagraph to both paragraph 1 on marine and paragraph 2 on island biodiversity in the annex. To improve the robust engagement of a broader range of stakeholders in the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, and in particular, ensuring the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities, women and girls, children and youth, and persons with disabilities most relevant to Target 22. We kindly invite parties to support this proposal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Youth. Now I would like to request microphone to 273, CBD Alliance.
You ask me and you ask this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak on behalf of the CBD Alliance on agenda item 8B on conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. Over 40 new projects and experiments of marine geoengineering techniques are currently proposed or ongoing in many regions of the world. This could have serious and long-lasting impacts on marine and coastal biodiversity and on related communities and livelihoods. Many of them are self-named blue carbon projects. The London Convention and Protocol on Ocean Dumping are very concerned over these projects and are currently analyzing the impacts of the main marine geoengineering techniques proposed. CBD needs to recall and implement its precautionary decisions on ocean fertilization and geoengineering that covers also marine geoengineering. The CBD Alliance suggests to insert the following text in document CBD/SAPSTA/26/7, section 8B. Under the section 6 on recommendations, in the paragraph on recalling prior decisions, we suggest recall decisions 916C on ocean fertilization and decision X1033W, as well as decision 1129 on biodiversity and climate change. On the paragraph on welcoming also collaborative efforts with other UN organizations, we suggest to insert the London Convention and London Protocol on the prevention of marine pollution by dumping of wastes and other matters. In point 5 of this paragraph, add a new paragraph, 5 bis, welcomes the ongoing work of the London Convention and Protocol on marine geoengineering techniques that could have impacts on marine biodiversity. Also, 5 ter reaffirmed decision 1033W and X on biodiversity and climate change and urge parties and invite other governments to implement this decision and report on actions taken related to it to the Executive Secretary. Under point 6 on requests to the Executive Secretary, we propose to insert a new paragraph, A bis, report the results of the ongoing work of London Convention and Protocol on Marine Geoengineering Techniques for its consideration at COP16. In the annex on gaps and areas in need of additional focus under the CBD, under point 1, with regard to marine and coastal biodiversity, further efforts are needed. We propose to insert a new paragraph, C bis, to implement decision 1033W, 1120, and the precautionary approach on geoengineering activities that may have impacts on marine and coastal biodiversity. On paragraph H, on managing blue carbon systems, add at the beginning of the paragraph, recalling decision CBD COP 1033W and the precautionary approach. We seek the support of parties for this statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, CBD Alliance. Now I would like to ask parties if there is support for youth statement. Support from Netherlands. Support from Austria. Uruguay. Mexico. Thank you very much. Support from statement of CBD Alliance. Fiji. Support from Egypt, and if I may ask party to tell us the name of party, because we can't see from here. We will take names of parties supporting CBD Alliance later. Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask IPLC and women group to upload their statements, please. And now I go to the list of observers. Each of them can speak for 2 minutes. First, I would like to ask microphone 203, Doalos.
Distinguished delegate, the Division for Ocean Affairs and Law of the Sea of the Office of Legal Affairs of the United Nations, or DUALOS, is pleased to provide some information of relevance to item A. DUALOS acts as the Secretariat of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which sets out the legal framework within which all activities in oceans and seas must be carried out, as well as of the United Nations Fish Stocks Agreement, which deals with straddling fish stocks and highly migratory fish stocks. In addition, DUALOS discharges mandates under relevant UN General Assembly resolutions, including in relation to the regular process for global reporting and assessment of the state of the marine environment, including socio-economic aspects, which has to date produced 2 World Ocean Assessments. DUALOS currently also performs the secretariat functions in relation to the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sensible use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ agreement, which was adopted in June 2023. Working in tandem with the CBD and other relevant instruments, the BBNJ agreement can make significant contributions to addressing the challenges facing the ocean, including the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Since its opening for signature, 89 states and the European Union have signed the agreement. 5 signatories, including Palau, Chile, Belize, Seychelles, and Monaco, have deposited instruments of ratification and thus becoming parties to the agreement. Last month, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 78/272, establishing a preparatory commission to prepare for the entry into force of the agreement and for the convening of the first meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the agreement. The Commission will hold an organizational meeting in New York from 24th to 26th June 2024 to discuss organizational matters. Distinguished delegates, DUALOS wishes you a successful deliberation on this item and remains ready to provide further information within its mandate where relevant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I ask for microphone 201, OHCHR?
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR. I will speak on sub-item 8B. Currently, references to Section C, including a human rights-based approach, are missing from the recommendation concerning conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. It is essential that the implementation of the KMGBF follows a human rights-based approach, not only in the context of terrestrial and inland water areas, but also in the context of marine, coastal, and island areas.
Speaker, may I ask you to speak slowly, please?
Sorry. As required by Section C, KMGBF, and international human rights law. OHCHR has several textual proposals concerning document substat 26/7 in this regard. We propose adding an additional commitment in paragraphs 1 and 2 of the annex to ensure that the implementation of the framework in the context of marine, coastal, and island biodiversity follows a human rights-based approach. We further propose language regarding the empowerment and protection of environmental human rights defenders active in the context of marine, coastal, and island biodiversity, in line with target 22 of the KMGBF, by adding an additional commitment in paragraphs 1 and 2 of the annex. To ensure participation in decision-making and access to justice and information and the protection of environmental human rights defenders in the context of marine, coastal, and island biodiversity. OHCHR welcomes the request to the Executive Secretary, included in operative paragraph 9C of the recommendation, to enhance the cooperation with other global organizations, and would like to highlight that OHCHR is available in this respect. We have submitted the statement in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there support for this statement from parties? There is support from Barbados. May I ask microphone to 160, IMO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the International Maritime Organization, it is my pleasure to contribute to the agenda item 8A today. IMO is the United Nations specialized agency with 176 member states and more than 130 observers, responsible for developing and adopting measures to improve the safety and security of international shipping and to prevent marine environment from ships. IMO is also the secretariat for the treaties that prevent pollution from dumping of waste and other matter at sea, the London Convention and London Protocol. IMO has adopted over 50 treaties, the vast majority of which are enforced and are globally binding. Of direct relevance to the discussions on marine and coastal biodiversity and EPSAs, IMO has several area-based management tools within its regulatory framework. These include, in particular, special areas and emission control areas on the MAPO, and particularly sensitive sea areas, namely PSSAs. To date, IMO has designated 19 special areas, 5 ECAs, and 16 PSSAs. These designations have strong links to the work under the CBD. For example, the PSSA process draws heavily on the EPSA process and criteria when identifying areas. IMO measures may be coincident with an EPSA or other MPAs, and may complement and contribute to their conservation objectives. In this regard, there are many areas of common interest between our two organizations when it comes to marine and coastal biodiversity. We look forward to continuing our dialogue and cooperation on these matters. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. As there is no request from IMO for any intervention, for any change in the text, I'm not asking for support. Anyway, Australia wish to support. Australia wish to comment. Floor to Australia.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have no comments on the previous speaker, but Australia would like to see and hear the interventions from the IIFB and the Women's Caucus, please. We think that they have a very strong view in this space, and we would like to hear their text read to the plenary floor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Australia. We will try. May I ask then we will follow your request, Australia. We will give a floor to 221, IPLC.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for providing notice for our intervention for the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. For item 8A and B. What comes from our oceans comes to our shores and lands. What comes from our lands interacts with our coastal areas and oceans. These environments are interconnected and are one in maintaining biodiversity and ecosystems across the planet that we call home and our mother. There are many aspects in this interplay that includes Indigenous peoples, local communities, women, youth, elders, knowledge holders, fishers, and hunters who practice customary sustainable use and the management and protection of our environments for our communities and our families. Ultimately, we want to pass these gifts on to our future generations. Our organization, the Inuit Circumpolar Council, has been engaged in negotiation and implementation of the Central Arctic Ocean Treaty to prevent unregulated high seas fishing, along with other Arctic and non-Arctic states. We are engaged in the processes of the International Maritime Organization and continue to deal with matters relating to EPSAs, shipping, marine pollution, including plastics, protected areas, including Indigenous protected areas, and climate change. We want to ensure these processes are inclusive, and in this spirit, the IFB would like to propose the following text suggestions for items A and B. Under document 7, add 1, under the recommendations for section 20, paragraph 4, at the end of the paragraph, it states holding of additional workshops. We'd like to insert comma, that should include Indigenous peoples, local communities, women, youth, and the use of traditional knowledge. Under paragraph 7 in the same section where it reads, including Indigenous peoples and local communities, comma, to insert women and youth. For item 8B, under the recommendations section, subsection 31, where the paragraph reads, recognizing the need to strengthen cooperation and collaboration, and continues to read, beyond national jurisdiction, comma, we'd like to insert, including Indigenous peoples and local communities. In the immediate following paragraph, where it reads, acknowledging the importance of science for decision-making, comma, we would like to insert, including the traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples and local communities. 2 paragraphs below that, where it reads, considering the valuable guidance also emerges from the work of other competent intergovernmental organizations, and continues to say other governments, comma, we'd like to insert Indigenous peoples and local communities. On the next page for paragraph 1, we'd like to welcome the adoption and include the pending implementation of the agreement under the UNCLOS. Under subsection paragraph 6, where it reads, compile and make available relevant guidance and experiences, and goes on to say other governments, comma, we'd like to insert Indigenous peoples and local communities. And finally, under subparagraph 8, where it says request the Executive Secretary, subject to the availability of resources, and it goes on to say regional organizations to insert Indigenous peoples and local communities. And it continues to say on opportunities for scientific and technical work, comma, and insert including the use of traditional knowledge. We thank the parties for their consideration and support.
Thank you very much. Is there support for this statement from Australia, Bahamas? Canada? Thank you very much. May I ask microphone to 257, women.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the CBD Women Caucus for item 8, conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity. In crafting effective marine and coastal biodiversity policies, it's imperative to adopt a human right-based approach, one that prioritizes the full, effective, meaningful, and gender-sensitive participation of all stakeholders, including Indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth. Women and gender experts must be actively involved in advisory groups related to oceanic matters, in accordance with COP decisions 15/11 and SUBSTA/REC/24/10. Their perspectives and expertise are invaluable in shaping inclusive and equitable policies that address the diverse needs and challenges faced by marine and coastal communities. Furthermore, we express our deep concern regarding the proliferation of marine geoengineering projects proposed in various regions. These initiatives have significant risk to marine and coastal biodiversity, as well as the livelihoods of those dependent on those ecosystems. We urge the parties to reaffirm and uphold the precautionary principle in the decisions on geoengineering. In that sense, we propose inclusion to the following critical points to be included in the document 26/7 in the part of recommendation in the follow a human rights-based approach in spatial planning and management process regarding marine and coastal biodiversity. Second one, to enhance the documentation framework for locally managed marine areas with the aim of optimizing the protection of access rights for coastal communities while also meeting the criteria for recognition as other effective area-based conservation measures, OECMs. Third, to improve understanding of marine biodiversity in deep sea systems, including with regard to linkages across benthic and pelagic ecosystems, and avoid harmful activities. And in document 26/7/1 related to EFSAs, in paragraph 3 and 15, about collaboration with competent intergovernmental organizations, we suggest to add the inclusion of women and youth due to the importance of diverse perspectives and intergenerational equity. We would like the Chair to ask parties to show support for our consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Women. Is there support of parties for this statement? Namibia, Cote d'Ivoire, Dominican Republic, DRC. Thank you very much. We now go to observers who can talk for 2 minutes. IWC, microphone to 195.
The International Whaling Commission welcomes the attention given to item 8B, conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, and highlights the following areas that require further attention to which we could contribute. We would like to cross-reference to the gaps identified in document SAPSTA 26.3, the need for tools for the gathering of information on the threat status of species at the population and subpopulation levels to implement Target 4. The IWC suggests that this be included in the list of gaps and areas in need of additional focus regarding marine and coastal biodiversity to be annexed to the recommendations to COP16. The IWC is the depository of data and in-depth assessments of cetaceans across the world, including robust abundance estimates, distribution, and threats. These data could also provide a useful tool to identify important marine areas to achieve Target 3 and to collaborate with the new treaty on the high seas. Regarding pollution in the same list of gaps, 1F and G, it is important to include the impact of plastic pollution and to reinforce work on noise pollution. The inclusion of the impact on biodiversity is critical in the ongoing process of an international treaty on plastics. Ship strikes are an important threat to cetaceans and other marine animals that is not currently considered in the POW that needs to be added. Finally, the IWC notes that bycatch and entanglement constitutes the biggest threat to cetaceans, and increased efforts are needed to mainstream biodiversity in fisheries management to meet the goals and targets of the KM-GBF. The meeting of the FAO Committee on Fisheries in July is particularly important in this regard. The IWC seeks parties' support for our proposals and is available to provide further information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there support of parties? Spain supported. Finland supported. France supported. Gabon supported. Thank you very much. Microphone to 194, IUCN.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I deliver this statement on behalf of IUCN, WWF, and the Ocean and Climate Platform. First, on EPSAS, sub-item 8A, we welcome the progress achieved during the technical and legal expert workshops, which built on several years of extensive negotiation and on the work of the informal advisory group. And we welcome SEPSTA's recommendation to adopt the modalities included in Annex 1. We support efforts to ensure the EPSA process continues and encourage parties to take the necessary steps for that to happen at COP16. It is critical to support and advance this scientific process with the full participation of relevant experts and knowledge holders through the proposed modalities to modify and describe new EPSAs. And it is critical given their crucial role in the achievement of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as other relevant international frameworks, including the BBNJ Agreement. Secondly, on conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, sub-item 8B, we concur with the identified gaps and areas in need of additional focus to support the KMGBF, and we emphasize the importance of fully implementing the existing marine and coastal biodiversity program of work and the Marine COP decisions, all of which support the achievement of the KMGBF. Regarding areas of collaboration and cooperation with relevant global and regional organizations in the context of the BBNJ agreement, we welcome the strong and continued collaboration between the CBD Secretariat and UN Doalos, and we thank them both for co-organizing an excellent side event on Monday. To conclude, we welcome the SEPSTA recommendation and stand ready to support parties and the Executive Secretary in advancing work under this agenda item. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. May I see support of parties for this statement? Canada, thank you very much. Gabon, thank you. Fiji, thank you. May I ask microphone to 162, ISA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Established by UNCLOS and its 1994 implementation agreement, ISA's function is to regulate mineral resource-related activities in the seabed beyond the national jurisdiction, protect the environment from harmful effects of such activities, and promote marine scientific research and technology transfer. ISA places particular importance on collaborating with relevant organizations, and our ongoing collaboration with the CBD Secretariat is a good example of such collaboration. Scientific data collected by ISA are essential for the effective implementation of UNCLOS, as well as the overall objectives of the CBD. Since 2001, ISA contractors have invested over $300 million in collecting environmental baseline data. These data are publicly available through ISA's database, Deep Data. Such data are critical for environmental planning and management. In the Central Pacific Ocean, ISA has established a network of areas of particular environmental interest, covering over 1.9 million square kilometers of the seafloor, and designed to ensure that biodiversity across the region is maintained. Regional environmental planning has greatly benefited from the scientific and technical experiences of CBD in describing EPSAs. Our flagship biodiversity program, the Sustainable Seabed Knowledge Initiative, is designed to improve knowledge of deep sea species and provide opportunities for capacity development. We are delighted to collaborate with the CBD Secretariat in this initiative. We also value our ongoing collaboration with the CBD through the Sustainable Ocean Initiative. We look forward to further enhancing our collaboration with CBD within the context of ISA's mandate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone to 197, Medpan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The following suggestions are made on behalf of MEDPAN regarding document CBD-Sub/26/7, Conservation and Sustainable Use of Marine and Coastal Biodiversity. On Section 2, MEDPAN welcomes the strategic reviews and analysis of the programs of work on marine and coastal biodiversity and on island biodiversity, and MEDPAN suggests to complete the list in the annex on gaps and areas in need of additional focus under the Convention of Biological Diversity to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework with regard to marine and coastal island biodiversity by adding a B-bis as follows: to enhance the connectivity between the area-based conservation measures within existing networks of marine protected areas and spatial planning, as well as between MPA networks to improve the cross-border connectivity. Regarding Section 4, potential options for modalities for collaboration and cooperation with relevant global and regional organizations in the context of the BBNG agreement, strong of its experience and in exchanging and collaborating with other regional networks and national agencies, MEDPAN emphasizes the critical importance and usefulness of international collaboration and cooperation that should be widened to other regional bodies and stakeholders. So MEDPAN suggests to add the reference to existing MPA networks next to relevant global and regional organizations into the point 27, paragraphs E, F, G, and H. I don't read, I will just send the text later. And finally, on the section on recommendations, concurring with the critical need for the robust engagement of a broader range of stakeholders in the implementation of the framework, MEDPAN also suggests to include in point 5 the following invite relevant global and regional organizations and related networks to enhance their work on the issue. So I don't continue with the text, just to add these unrelated networks. So we would like to ask support to the parties to consider the suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there support from parties for MEDPAN? Spain? Israel? They're supporting. Montenegro is supporting. Egypt? Thank you very much. Argentina is asking for 4.
Thank you. Very, very briefly, just to express support to the previous speaker, the International Seabed Authority, since we were not asked about the specific support, we would like to put that in record. Thank you.
Thank you very much. ISA has support from Argentina. My apologies for not asking for support from parties. Dear delegates, thank you for very rich discussion. After hearing your interventions, I propose to establish a contact group. This contact group will focus on areas of which parties have expressed divergent views in both sub-agenda items. The group will be co-chaired by Ms. Erika Lucero of Argentina and Mr. Gote Hansen of Norway. Together with co-chairs of contact group and with support from Secretariat, I will produce a non-paper for discussion by the contact group. The Secretariat will inform us of the time and room for the contact group to meet. Now I would like to invite Secretariat to respond to point of order of Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In response to the concern raised by delegates from Brazil, the time for the contact group tonight and also Friends of Chairs established by the contact group co-chairs have been revised as follows. The Friends of Chairs group under the contact group on indicators monitoring framework on the binary indicator for target 13 will meet at 5 to 6 p.m. instead of lunchtime. And also the Friends of Chairs group for Target 17 will meet from 7 to 8 p.m. instead of dinner time. This group will open to everybody and the room will be announced on the screen. Therefore, the contact group on item 3 on monitoring framework will continue its work from 8 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. at the same room, CR1. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Colleagues, I will now turn chairing duties over to Ms. Marina for Weissenberg of Finland for our consideration of item 9 on biodiversity and health.
Friends, please, could you consult and talk outside because we need to proceed. This is the last item on our agenda and we are very scarce with time. Please take your seat. I will start in 1 minute. 1 minute. Please sit down. Okay, welcome to this last session of the plenary of first reading. And I thank you, Senka, and dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to chair and guide you through this next item on our agenda, the item 9, biodiversity and health. And I will start with asking the Secretariat to introduce this item. But before Marianella takes the floor, I would like to ask you to please upload your intervention now, at the latest, if you haven't done so, to the portal, because it will ease up our continuation of the work. And it's also much appreciated for the translators. And please speak slowly. Thank you and enjoy. This will be a fun and a very good session. And we will be chuck, chuck, chuck. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. For agenda item 9 on biodiversity and health, the Secretariat has prepared a processional document 26.8, which contains a summary of the intersessional activities, elements for a draft recommendation, the draft global action plan, and target messages. An information document, information 3, has also been prepared with supplementary information for the action plan. I would like to bring to your attention that the revised version of the action plan that you see in the document has gone through a peer review process involving more than 62 submissions from parties, as well as organizations from a wide range of disciplines, including health-related organizations, NGOs, and other United Nations bodies and organizations, among others. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And as during previous sessions, I want to remind you that we will be limiting statements to 5 minutes for regional groups, 3 minutes for parties, 4 minutes for IPLCs and major stakeholder groups, and 2 minutes for non-parties to the protocol and observers, time permitting. Following interventions by observers, I will give a brief chance for parties that may wish to comment on or support any specific proposals made by these organizations. Please focus on the essential points and upload the full text of your intervention no later than 1 hour after the close of this session. Please note, however, that your key points, especially those that you would like to have reflected in the draft recommendations, should be read out in the room and shared to everybody. Thank you. I will now open the floor for comments. And please press the button when you ask for the floor. Thank you. We will start with Israel, followed by Fiji.
Thank you, Chair. I had pressed my button a lot earlier as I wanted to ask the Secretariat something about the scheduling, and I apologize for interrupting the debate here on the biodiversity and health. But just a point of clarification, the report we got back from the Bureau this morning was that the discussions on biodiversity and health would continue into the afternoon plenary, and once that plenary ended, the monitoring group on the contact group on monitoring would probably be able to begin its deliberations sometime in the afternoon, maybe about 4 or 5 o'clock. The way it was presented by the Secretariat right before we switched was that the monitoring group will not meet until 8 p.m. today. So my question to the Secretariat is, if this agenda item on biodiversity and health ends or completes its work this afternoon, during the afternoon session before 6 p.m., is that just going to be the end of the day, or would the monitoring contact group be expected to meet earlier? What is the expectation? And if so, can this please be posted as quickly as possible onto the website so that people will know about the schedule change? Thank you, Secretariat.
Thank you, distinguished delegates from Israel. So in the previous session under Marine and Coastal agenda item, point of order was raised by Brazil, and in response to that, there was some modification of the timing. So now the contact group on item 3 on monitoring framework will start from 8 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. And in the afternoon, the Friends of Chairs group on the binary indicator for target 13, which was established by the contact group on monitoring framework yesterday, will meet from 5 to 6 p.m. And the Friends of Chairs group for target 17 will meet from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And the venue, the meeting room, will be posted on the screen. I hope it clarifies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ji-jun. So my question is now, did Fiji ask for the floor? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fiji would like to make intervention on biodiversity and health. Fiji welcomes the draft recommendation in document CBD-26/8, supports the mainstreaming of global actions on biodiversity and health linkages into national policies, and this action plan represents an opportunity to advance efforts to jointly promote biodiversity and human health. The tragic consequences of environmental degradation on human health have become increasingly clear in recent years, as evidenced by devastation caused by recent spillovers of viruses from animals to humans that likely caused by COVID-19, for instance, including nutritional insecurity and increase in NCDs for island developing states. Further, scientific models show that the frequency of major epidemics and pandemics driven by spillover of viruses between animals and humans will increase several-fold in the coming decades if the current pace of environmental degradation continues and biodiversity loss is not reversed or halted. Highlighting the interlinkages between biodiversity and human health offers a compelling motivation to invest in protection of biodiversity, which will ultimately support implementation of the GBF. Fiji therefore supports this draft action plan to be adopted at COP16 to enable cross-sectoral work on biodiversity and health at the national level, and this must be complemented with ongoing technological transfer, financial and capacity building to ensure that small island developing states like Fiji is effectively mainstreamed and implement the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health. A One Health, One Planet approach which holistically addresses the interconnectedness of the current triple planetary crisis, or shall I say the quadruple planetary crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, pollution, and health is key. Therefore, Fiji calls for enhanced cooperation and collaboration between WHO, UNFCCC, CBD, UNCCD, BBNJ, RFMO, FAO, and any other relevant competent bodies and organizations. Madam Chair, Fiji will submit its full recommendations in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiji. Then we go to Canada, followed by Norway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Canada welcomes and supports the CBD work related to biodiversity and health. The conservation of biodiversity and its sustainable use are critical for human health. It is critical to address and understand the effect of environmental health issues linked to air, water, and soil pollution, ecosystem degradation, biodiversity loss, and climate change for the prevention of zoonosis, chronic and non-communicable disease, as well as for pandemic resilience and recovery. We agree that the Global Action Plan would have positive enabling environmental impacts and that it would contribute positively to human health. Canada feels that a concrete plan of action under the CBD will help to strengthen and consolidate the biodiversity pillar, often underrepresented in the One Health discussion. Canada supports the recommendation for COP16 to adopt the Global Action Plan and is hoping that this will be moved forward at Substa 26. Canada would only have minor changes to clarify two aspects of the draft recommendation.
Please, Canada, slow down.
Thank you. We recognize that there has been significant work in the Global Action Plan. In particular, we are pleased to notice the more gender-responsive approach evident in the revised draft. We know that the impacts of biodiversity loss are felt more severely by women and that there are a number of health concerns that impact women differently. Canada is ready to adopt the Global Action Plan as presented in this document. However, if parties agree to reopen the text, Canada will have a few edits and additions, notably to add language related to genetic diversity. We will send the suggested changes in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. We have now Norway, followed by Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished colleagues. Norway expresses its gratitude to the Secretariat for the constructive work that has led to the revised draft of the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health. Norway supports the Global Action Plan as it aims to mainstream biodiversity and health interlinkages into national policies, strategies, programs, and accounts. Norway welcomes the enabling conditions for relevant government authorities to collaborate closely and coordinate their work on these interlinkages. Although we acknowledge that there are still some weaknesses in the general structure and terminology of the action plan, we urge parties to refrain from reopening line-by-line negotiations on this item and risking the perfect becoming the enemy of the good. The plan can be updated in light of new developments and knowledge. We support the Global Action Plan as outlined in the annex of the recommendation, and I look forward to the upcoming discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Burkina Faso, followed by Brazil.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Burkina Faso is speaking on behalf of the African Group. Chair, Africa would like to congratulate the Secretariat for the work conducted and for the drafting document CBD-Live, and for taking into account the comments made to improve the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health. Africa recognises the importance of and the interlinkages between biodiversity and health, in particular for healthcare and for the well-being of local communities, the production of medicine and vaccines. Traditional knowledge related to biological resources of indigenous peoples and of local communities provide precious information to researchers and contribute to the development of new medicine and vaccines. The recent COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular the Ebola pandemic, remind us of the importance of the link between the degradation of biodiversity and the appearance of diseases, in particular transmissible and fatal ones. Africa also believes that conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity are important for the prevention of disease. The draft recommendation submitted by the Secretariat of CBD sets out in Annex 1 a global action plan on biodiversity and health. Nevertheless, this action plan does not recognise the importance of biodiversity as the first source of healthcare for local communities and indigenous peoples, and a crucial element for sustainable conservation and use of biodiversity for well-being, nutrition, and healthcare for African peoples. Africa appreciates the general measures which are proposed in the document, even though these are voluntary, and advocates for the following: strengthening of research on interlinkages between biodiversity and health, recommends the sharing of benefits arising from the use of biodiversity, including the sharing of vaccines, medicine, and other pharmaceutical products based on biological resources, the improvement and intensification of access to science and technology by the strengthening of capacities and competencies, and the sharing of knowledge with and towards developing countries for the sustainable conservation and use of biodiversity for the health of their people. Increased collaboration and the sharing of best practices between countries, investment in capacity building, the sharing of knowledge and the advantages of biodiversity for health, and ensuring follow-up, more investment in innovative strategies to combat pollution, the strengthening of activities to conduct research into linkages between health and biodiversity, in particular between humanity and biodiversity, strengthening technical and scientific cooperation between developing countries and developed countries, strengthening monitoring of diseases linked to humanity and biodiversity, which requires capacity building as well. The strengthening of biosafety when it comes to the links between biodiversity and health, including the prevention of the introduction and or propagation of invasive alien species, pathogens, and emerging infectious diseases, amongst others, taking into account the links between the well-being of animals and follow-up of Resolution 5.1 of UNEA 5.2 on the link between the well-being of animals, the environment, and sustainable development. Strengthening of cooperation with other multilateral environmental agreements and conventions, and strengthening of biomonitoring. For all of these reasons, the African Group supports the draft recommendations set out in document CBD Subster 26.8, including the adoption of the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health. We also propose a few amendments to Annex 1.3, Section B, on targets 13 and 17, paragraph 2, but we'll submit these to the Secretariat in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Burkina Faso, on behalf of the African Group. Then we go to Brazil, followed by Belgium.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil understands that our efforts to address and promote the interlinkages between biodiversity and health must recognize the importance of the three objectives of the Convention in a balanced manner. The plan must also recognize the urgent need to address the inequities in global health and the need to strengthen health systems in developing countries. Unfortunately, we fear that the draft Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health fails to consider the need to ensure the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic diversity, NDSI. It does not include robust provisions on the need to ensure equitable access to health products that could improve the capacity of countries to address the detrimental effects of biodiversity loss to human health. In doing so, the plan is not consistent with paragraph 5.a of COP Decision 15/29, which highlights the need to recognize issues of equity, including those related to benefit sharing and NDSI. This casts a doubt on the transparency and inclusivity of the work undertaken by the Secretariat. On top of that, we do notice that the draft has introduced a number of topics that fall beyond the mandate of this convention. From Brazil's perspective, actions related to antimicrobial resistance under Section A and proposed actions for targets 7 and 10 encroach on the mandate of the World Health Organization and the World Organization for Animal Health. On a similar vein, Brazil is not in a position to accept concepts that lack multilaterally agreed upon definitions, such as triple planetary crisis, sustainable healthy diets, telecoupling, planetary health, planetary well-being, earth systems, and life support systems. We understand that those concepts are still under development and lack agreed metrics to be translated into actionable policy interventions. Regarding proposals on dietary patterns, Brazil acknowledges the importance of promoting adequate and nutritious food for healthy diets. However, we understand that FAO is the primary forum to advance discussions on food security, and the recommendations under the plan prove overly prescriptive and are not consistent with SDG2, as they fail to acknowledge the wide variety of social, economic, and cultural circumstances. Similar concerns also apply to reference to food supply, supply chains, and animal protein consumption. We would suggest not including a list of potential guidance under paragraph 8 of Annex 1, as many examples have not been subject to an intergovernmental review. We do notice that the GBF does not supersede the relevant provisions of the Convention in terms of means of implementation, in particular Articles 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Therefore, we would request that actions related to Target 20 are placed under a separate line with more robust provisions. The draft plan would also benefit from additional reference to traditional medicine and phytotherapeutic products. At this stage, Brazil is of the view that we should defer consideration of enclosures 1 and 2 in Annex 2. Brazil is deeply concerned that the current draft does not provide a basis for future negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we go to Belgium, followed by Argentina.
Dear Chair, thank you for giving us the floor. Belgium thanks the Secretariat for the effort in revising the Global Action Plan and the targeted messages for mainstreaming biodiversity in the health sector. We strongly stressed the importance to finalize the Global Action Plan and adopt it at COP16. Belgium has amendments to the Global Action Plan to ensure better alignment with the CBD language, the Kunming-Montreal GBF, and the findings of the State of Knowledge review on biodiversity and human health. We recommend including references for the text in the second column of the table, listing action for mainstreaming biodiversity and health interlinkages into the implementation of the GBF. Furthermore, we have concern regarding the lack of connection between the two enclosures and the Global Action Plan itself and the draft recommendation. Therefore, we suggest two structural changes to the enclosure. Firstly, we suggest designating Enclosure 1 as an Annex 3. We understand the list of monitoring elements aims to assist the implementation of the Global Action Plan, but should serve as informative guidelines, especially given the pending work regarding the request in Decision 14/4 to develop scientific indicator. Secondly, we propose to delete Enclosure 2 and make a reference to biodiversity and health interlinkages into the draft recommendation and referencing Substa 26 INF3 document. Regarding the draft recommendation, Belgium suggests addition related to the definition of human health and One Health, on the interlinkages of the Global Action Plan with the Horizon Scanning Report, and on the option to integrate biodiversity into COVID-19 stimulus and pandemic recovery measure. Furthermore, we stress the importance to complete the work on the development of integrated science-based indicator, metrics, and progress measurement tool on biodiversity and health. We propose to explore the development of an online information platform in consultation with the WHO to facilitate knowledge sharing and capacity building among parties. Finally, we have also suggestions to consider the potential support for private healthcare entities and national health budget. We will send our written amendments to the draft recommendation and to the annexes to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. Then we have Argentina, followed by Japan.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. The pin, which I have on the lapel of my jacket, represents a guanaco, a camelid which lives in large numbers in Patagonia, in Argentina, and the Argentine Andes. For several years, Argentina has worked in the development of antibodies and medicinal products based on the genetic resources of the guanaco, sustainably using native biodiversity and applying the Nagoya Protocol. This work illustrates the vision of my country on the links between biodiversity and health, broaching them through a focus on health based on science, transparency, research, access to, and participation in benefits. In this regard, Argentina agrees with many of the ideas contained in the proposed action plan, which reflect priorities which we share. Nevertheless, we need to recognize that the plan is ambitious, it needs to be refined, and that it will require considerable efforts of international cooperation for its effective implementation. In this regard, with regards to the draft decision and annexes, Argentina has some proposed amendments which we believe necessary to move forwards in the adoption of the action plan at COP16. We will sum them up in 5 points. Firstly, we suggest clear references to means of implementation and will propose language already agreed upon in previous decisions of the COP, where global action plans were adopted. Secondly, we believe it's necessary to revise several paragraphs in order to reflect language agreed upon, which could be more easy to accept. Thirdly, the document contains several assertions without sources. We would like to know how these assertions have been substantiated so that we can consider their inclusion. Fourthly, Argentina has some suggested modifications to Annex 1, and we would suggest providing time for their discussion in a contact group. We would like to highlight some of the actions which seem to redefine targets of the global biodiversity framework, or endorse definitions without multilateral agreements such as One Health or sustainable and healthy diets. Fifthly, Argentina can, in general, support Annex 2. We would just request a few small changes. We have sent our comments in writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Argentina. Then we go to Japan, followed by Guatemala.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan would like to appreciate the dedicated work of the Secretariat and the effort of the members of the Alliance on One Health, and welcomes the draft revision of the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health as requested by Decision 15/29. However, Japan has some concerns about the description of DSI for the Target 13 of the Annex 3B of the document Substat 26.8 regarding the Global Action Plan contained in Annex 1. Since multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of DSI is still being discussed under the OEWG process, this description should be revised appropriately. While access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits are interrelated, the importance of the access to genetic resources should be emphasized more in the action plan and should be described appropriately. Japan will submit its proposed amendments in writing. We also consider it is important to take into account relevant instruments and scientific information to be provided by other frameworks, such as the resolution of UNEP EA6, resolutions 4 on promoting synergies, cooperation, or collaboration for national implementation of multilateral environmental agreements adopted at UNIA 6, as well as the ongoing IPES Nexus assessment in order to ensure effective implementation of the Global Action Plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Guatemala, followed by Republic of Korea.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The efforts made for integrating biodiversity and health from Guatemala, we've been working on this to principally set up a sectoral bureau under the approach of One Health, which we consider to be opportune to recall the focal points on health and to recommend to the COP and request the Secretariat of the Convention in collaboration with the quadripartite group to make sure that there is capacity building on biological safety for human health for the implementation of the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health and One Health. With regard to the table on the measures to be introduced and the links between biodiversity and health in the KMGBF, which is included in the draft decision, particularly targets 17 and 19 on indigenous knowledge, which literally says we should support the initiatives to validate the efficiency and the security of the biodiversity, and to modify this and take out the word validate, because this could have a connotation that goes against local and indigenous knowledge. We'd also like to see included in the text recognizing and respecting the rights of traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Guatemala. Republic of Korea, followed by Peru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Republic of Korea would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing this agenda document. My delegation is in general agreement with the Global Action Plan and the draft decision. Additionally, we would like to emphasize the importance of international information sharing when considering implementation at the country level. Awareness of biodiversity and health interlinkages has increased dramatically since the COVID-19 pandemics. The issue is being discussed in a number of international agreements and organizations. Because a significant number of government agencies and relevant sectors need to work together in order to implement this at the national level, we believe that extensive sharing of best practices and lessons learned will help parties translate biodiversity and health interlinkages into effective policies. Therefore, we would like to propose some amendments to subparagraph 7C of the draft decision, which we have submitted in writing online. Thank you.
Thank you, Korea. Then we go to Peru, followed by Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Peru would like to congratulate the Secretariat for the efforts made and by the Executive Secretary to count with on the revised draft Global Action Plan and the specific messages for the integration of biodiversity in the area of health. We also like to recognize that as an integrated process that is relatively new, it's necessary to work on specific issues and the relevant tools to measure the progress made that will allow us to be able to report on biodiversity and health interlinkages. Our country is a mega diverse country, and we are noting all of the issues that have been done on other conventions and in other spaces of international meetings which look at this, which is the case of the CITES Convention. We'd like to express our firm commitment to the integration of One Health in the management of biodiversity. And in this context, we'd like to highlight the fact that in 2023, the Andean Parliament went forward with the implementation of the approach One Health in the member sectors of the Parliament. And in that way, those who are part of the Andean Parliament have expressed their willingness to adopt measures on the approach with regard to our national orders. And we'd also like to highlight the fact that during this, with the support of member states, we have looked at the issues of zoonotics and the equitable approaches of the representative of human health. And from an environmental and zoonotic point of view, these efforts go along with the active participation of the Ministry of Health in the negotiations of the pandemic treaty, which reflect the commitment of Peru to include this approach and to be collaborative with various ministries and governments. With regard to the integration of the mainstreaming of biodiversity and human health, we believe that this is to be done through incorporating One Health in our strategy and plan of action at national level in terms of biodiversity, which we are currently updating in accordance with Section C of the Global Framework. And in this regard, we have some elements for the Global Action Plan, and we believe that this is a key element. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peru. Then we go to Bangladesh, followed by Colombia.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, respected delegates. At the outset, Bangladesh extends sincere appreciation to the Secretariat for the updated draft of very important item, biodiversity and health. The draft action plan is focused on human health and interlinkages of biodiversity and health. However, health and resilience of wild population is also very crucial. In paragraph 1 of Annexure 1, Bangladesh recommends to include livestock and poultry, along with environment, agriculture, water, etc., and to include waste management in lieu of only waste. The paragraph 8 of Annexure 1 pointed out the name of several documents, but all these documents are already published in CBD/Substa/26/info/3. Bangladesh proposes to remove paragraph 8 from the text. Madam Chair, regarding target 21 of knowledge and engagement of people mentioned in page 19, our submission is to ensure biodiversity and health co-benefits column. Bangladesh would like to recommend that the health benefits of nature should be incorporated into formal education system. Formal education system could be one of the best way to mainstream information to eventually integrate biodiversity and health linkages into decision-making at every level. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. Then we have Colombia, followed by Mexico.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Colombia would like to thank the Secretariat for the document Substa 26.8, which presents the draft Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health, as well as the messages for the integration of biodiversity in the sector of health. Madam Chair, the pandemic recalled to us the importance of integrating human health, animal health, in consonance with human rights and the right to a clean environment, which was recognized by the General Assembly of the United Nations in 2022. This is an important access to reinforce the efforts of health, and we are working on this with the Conference of the Parties in October in Colombia. We would like to highlight the importance of this comprehensive approach, in which we note that the implementation at national level will be in accordance with national specificities. This plan of action is a very important aspect for the KMGBF and involves all of the government levels in society to integrate the environmental and biodiversity angle in our plans and programs that are corresponding to this. An opportunity to integrate this theme is the updating of the plans of action for biodiversity, which we are working on in Colombia with the different sectors involved, including that of health. What is not less important is to guarantee that this plan of action on biodiversity and health is in synergy with all of the mechanisms of mainstreaming of the Convention. And it's important to consider the fact that this must be a framework that is flexible, cross-cutting, inclusive for all of the conventions relating to biodiversity. Colombia recognizes the importance of maintaining and strengthening the work around One Health as a strategic approach, which is integrated in a manner that is including biology and all elements of health. One Health is cross-cutting for ecosystems to make sure that they are functional and to maintain human health in food security, and to note the fact that there is a loss of biodiversity because of climate change and all of the other types of pollution. In that context, we're making progress on the construction of approaches that will make sure that we deal with the loss of biodiversity, illnesses, and to work on more equity in terms of health. Madam Chair, we have comments that we would like to make on the text, which we will send to you, to the Secretariat, in writing.
Thank you, Colombia, and please speak slowly. Now we are going to approach the lunch. I will have 3 interventions, and I'm saying it's Mexico, Switzerland, and United Kingdom. And those countries or parties which has not asked for the floor, please start to reconsider that you will ask for the floor, because I will then close the list before we go to lunch. So you have due time, but if you are preparing an intervention or you want to have one, please ask for the floor so you are on the list. Thank you. So I give the floor now to Mexico.
Gracias. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Mexico supports the proposal of recommendations to the COP to adopt the draft global action plan on biodiversity and health to support the KMGBF. We also support the messages that were made specifically on the integration of biodiversity in the health sector. We believe it's important to favor improvement of health conditions, education as well, of indigenous peoples for economic general development for the areas in which they live, as well as recognizing the contribution of traditional knowledge from indigenous peoples and local communities as well, in line with the conclusions of the document on the determinants of indigenous health, which was published in the 22nd period of sessions by the Permanent Forum on Issues Relating to Indigenous Peoples. And in terms of the suggestions made by the Secretariat, we would like to make it explicit that key actors such as organizations and academic organizations, women and youth, are important in the adoption and the implementation of the Global Action Plan, as well as with the quadripartite action plan. We note that animal health is included in a generic manner and can be interpreted as part of the ecosystem health, And there's only one specific reference made to animal health with regard to migratory species. However, recognizing the conflict that there is with human beings, and that this can cause some zoonotic outbreaks of illness, it's important to expressly mention, at least in the first paragraph of the annex, this issue. And we'd also like to suggest that in the annex, the factors, indigenous factors, should be noted as the interconnection between aspects of biodiversity, health, traditional medicine, and spirituality under the approach of biocultural patrimony. And this concept includes social aspects, economic, biological, and environmental aspects. It's necessary to make a differentiation between the direct use and overuse, which can be related to loss of biodiversity, particularly in the issue of traditional medicine. And on the other hand, to note the role of the practice of traditional medicine in conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Taking into account all that's been said, we have some specific comments we'd like to make with regard to the proposed recommendation, as well as on the annex, which we will send to you in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. Then we go to Switzerland and United Kingdom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Switzerland supports the revised draft of the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health, as it provides a good overview of the biodiversity and health interlinkages, of the different tools and body of knowledge on this issue, as well as of concrete actions to mainstream biodiversity and health interlinkages. In particular, we welcome the clear connection between the revised draft Global Action Plan and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and its targets. Switzerland also welcomes the One Health approach and the collaboration with the World Health Organization and the Quadripartite Alliance on One Health. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Then we have United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to express our gratitude to the Secretariat for producing the note contained in Subster/26/8. This note recalls that the Executive Secretary was requested at COP14 to produce a draft Global Action Plan. Since then, the COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us all of the inextricable linkages between biodiversity and human health, and the need to mobilize multiple sectors, disciplines, and communities to tackle threats to health and ecosystems. While the UK was disappointed that the Global Action Plan could not be adopted at COP15, we thank the Secretariat for their revised draft. We believe that the revised draft contains a helpful set of voluntary actions that parties, including the UK, can apply to mainstream biodiversity and health linkages within policies and strategies. We believe it will also act as a useful instrument for supporting the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which parties have agreed should be implemented with the consideration of the One Health approach, among other holistic approaches. The UK was pleased to take part in the peer review of the Global Action Plan earlier this year. Parties have engaged on this draft for many years in many different ways, and while the UK has a number of amendments that we believe could further strengthen the plan, we need to finalise it as quickly as possible to ensure that we can adopt it at COP16 without further delay. Therefore, we encourage parties to raise only those issues which are truly critical to ensure the action plan can be finalised. In that regard, we do think it is important to ensure that any reference to human rights reflects language previously agreed by parties in the Global Biodiversity Framework. We want to avoid further detailed discussions on rights under this agenda item to ensure that we use our limited time to make good progress on the Global Action Plan. The UK is supportive of the targeted messages contained in Annex 2. We think that these will be helpful for us and other parties as we increase our efforts to mainstream biodiversity into our health sector. We also support parties being encouraged to designate a national focal point on a voluntary basis. We welcome the opportunity for parties and others to share information on indicators and examples of implementation of the action plan on a voluntary basis. However, we believe further discussion is needed on the best mechanism to facilitate this. Finally, we think the list of monitoring elements in Enclosure 1 could be helpful in aiding parties in voluntarily measuring their progress in implementing the Global Action Plan, particularly as the GBF monitoring framework does not have health-related indicators. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. And now, in fact, there is one lucky country before lunch, Netherlands. We have still time, so we will take you, and then we will break for lunch and some announcements. So please, Netherlands.
Thank you, Chair. Lucky us. The Netherlands aligns itself with the statement made by Belgium. The Netherlands would like to thank the Secretariat for the document on biodiversity and health and the revised Global Action Plan on biodiversity and health. We welcome the action plan and the targeted messages for mainstreaming biodiversity into the health sector. We are ready to engage with other member states to finalize the plan. We highly value discussions on the complex connections between health, biodiversity loss, pollution, and climate change. It is of the utmost importance to tackle the planetary crisis in an integrated way. In this regard, we would like to emphasize the relevance of the One Health approach. We're looking forward to the outcomes of IPBES, thematic assessment of the interlinkages among biodiversity, water, food, and health. It is critical to address important common drivers, including unsustainable production and consumption patterns that threaten biodiversity and human health, linked to clean air, water quality, soil health, and noise and light pollution, as well as environmental and ecosystem degradation and climate change. Additionally, the Netherlands believes that biodiversity and all ecosystem services play a key role in our health and well-being, both physical and mental. Please, Chair, give us a few seconds, and I would like to hand over to our youth delegates to continue this intervention.
Thank you for our seat at the table. We need to address the effect of environmental factors on health for the prevention of zoonosis, antimicrobial resistance, communicable and non-communicable diseases. This requires a holistic, multidisciplinary, and whole-of-society approach at all levels. We also want to stress the importance of a rights-based approach. We therefore emphasize the importance of stakeholder inclusion, especially vulnerable groups, as well as cooperation with other multilateral environmental agreements and health agreements, and other relevant organizations and initiatives. In that regard, we note that children have not been recognized as key stakeholders in the Global Action Plan. They are also missing from OPs on health impact assessments, advocacy tools, and closing knowledge gaps. We therefore suggest to include a reference to children wherever youth is referred to, in line with KMGBF Target 22. Thank you, Chair. We will submit our comments in writing.
Thank you, Netherlands. This finalized the first session on this topic. We have still 26 parties, 4 IPLCs and major groups, and 5 observers who have asked for the floor. Please, those countries or parties or observers who have not asked for the floor, now is the moment. Because I don't want that we continue then after the lunch again to add on. So please, now it's your turn to press the button. We will continue at 3 p.m. So have a nice lunch, enjoy the sun, and I give the floor to the Secretariat. Is there any announcement? No announcement. Thank you very much. See you at 3 o'clock sharp. And we will start with Sudan. Sudan, Philippines, and Sweden. So Sudan is ready at 3 o'clock, please.